British company in the news right now that has just started implementing checks on employees to see if they're actually at their desk, because they have a basic requirement that they have to be at their desk, at the business, at the building, X number of hours a week. And they're installing software and other mechanisms to actually prove that you're there. And then people start feeling like, well, this was unfair policing. Well, but not if that's a company policy that you absolutely have to be at your desk for a certain, 20 hours a week.
Amazon, I believe, in 2025, they're doing away with remote work for the most part. And everyone has to report back to the office, because there have been abuses. Now, a lot of companies are still implementing hybrid schedules, but there are some paying rent on these empty office buildings.
Welcome to MetaGagement, the HR show that dives deep into the heart of employee engagement and workplace culture. Your hosts, Ann Scottlin and Dr. Lyman Montgomery, bring you a groundbreaking show that explores innovative strategies and insights to transform and elevate your organization's HR practices. Dr. Montgomery is an employee engagement expert and best-selling author, while Ann Scottlin is an acclaimed business consultant and podcaster. Together, they will unpack the complexities of modern HR challenges and reveal innovative solutions that can be immediately applied to your workplace. Please welcome Ann Scottlin and Dr. Lyman Montgomery.
Hey there, welcome back to HR MetaGagement. So glad you are here with us for this show and this final portion of our really fabulous series right now that we've been doing called Conducting Workplace Investigations. And these investigations are so important to a healthy HR department and how to really be proactive in your job and don't make the mistakes others have made. Learn it right from the beginning. So as always, this show, MetaGagement-HR, is about making the probable possible. I'm Ann Scottlin. I'm here with my co-host, the wonderful Dr. Lyman Montgomery. Hello, Lyman.
Hey, Ann, how are you doing? So excited about this final installment of Workplace Investigation, how we bring it all together.
Absolutely. Likewise. So, and today, closing the loop. How do we make those decisions and communicate those outcomes? And for those of our viewers and listeners, we're going to guide you through the critical final steps of an investigation. We'll cover how to make well-informed decisions. How do you document your process, and how do you communicate the results in a way that maintains trust and integrity within your organization, because there can be different sides of everything, right? So let's just jump in. But before we do, please like, subscribe, copy and paste this link and shoot it to someone who would enjoy our show. And as always, check out our website and MetaGagement-HR if you have any questions for us and to see what else we offer for you. So making these final decisions in the investigation, Lyman, what's involved in reviewing the evidence and these findings? What is most important?
Yeah, you want to make sure that all the evidence, all the testimonies are considered when it comes to making your final determination, whether that is a determination of responsibility or a determination that's inconclusive. Sometimes you just don't have enough evidence to support the charge, and you have to render a decision that, based on the evidence, we are unable to make a finding of responsibility. And that's okay. One of the things that I always would do when I was doing workplace investigation is I would make sure that I go through all of the testimonies, and then I would weed out those that were inconclusive. For example, let's say there's a discrepancy between John's testimony and Albert's testimony. Well, I'm going to put those aside and say, okay, which ones cooperate with each other? And then the ones that have gaps, I'm going to deal with them separately, because I might have to go back and re-interview, or maybe they said, oh, by the way, you need to talk to James. And so I want to make sure that I create two lists: testimony that support the charge, testimonies that are inconclusive, or maybe they contradict each other. And you want to make sure you've done your due diligence, especially those that are contradictory. Why did they contradict? Or maybe it was a lapse in judgment or a lapse in memory. Maybe, for example, they got the information correct, but the date was wrong. They said it
Mhm.
was Tuesday. It actually was a Wednesday.
Mm.
Okay. Well, that
Mhm.
could easily be cleared up. Maybe they said Joan when they meant John. It could be a slip of the tongue. So
Mm.
you want to make sure you clear those sort of things up when you're putting together your holistic review.
Mhm. And what about, I know there's legal and ethical considerations. If it's really become down to legal considerations, that probably means you have outside help involved in
Yes.
most cases, unless you're a very large corporation and have your own legal team. So then it comes down to these ethical considerations. How do you ensure your decision complies with standards and company policies?
Yeah. There's three things you want to make sure you do. The first thing, you want to make sure that the testimonies have been verified with
Mm.
a signature and a date. That's important because you don't want the person to say, well, wait a minute, that's not what I said. You also want to make sure, number two, that whenever you are considering a testimony, you can take into consideration their character. What
Mm.
if you got testimony from someone that has been proven to be untrustworthy or
Mm.
untruthful? You
Mhm.
can discount and say, you know what, or put an asterisk by that and say, the last three testimonies you gave were inaccurate or were misleading, but there's a chance that maybe this one is correct. But you can kind of hold that with an asterisk and say, okay, this person's character is a bit shady, but I'm still going to consider the testimony, but I may have to look into that particular testimony a little deeper because
Mhm.
of the history of being misleading, untruthful, or flat out lying. And you can consider the person's character when it comes to making a decision. The other is making sure that your investigation was done within the scope of your policies and also within the scope of the law. For example, as we mentioned in the previous podcast, you didn't lead the witness. You didn't point to a picture and say, oh, this was the person, right? Or make statements that would
Mm.
say, well, wasn't John there? Well, the person may not even know if John was there. And so you want to make sure that the techniques that you use, also, you don't want to intimidate the witness or
Mm.
force a confession. For example, saying, uh, we know you did it and you might as well come clean. And if you continue to play this game, I'm going to make sure that you're fired. Well, or making promises that you cannot uphold, such as, well, you know what? Nothing's going to happen. I just want to know the truth.
Mm.
Bait the person and telling the truth, and then you say, aha. And then you end up firing the person. Well, you've already established previously by saying, listen, nothing's going to happen to you. I just want to know the truth. And they tell you the truth, and you end up terminating. That again can be grounds for unethical investigation
Mhm.
because you've tricked the person into confessing and then you turned around and terminated the person when you
So
said you
you have to be careful to not find yourself dismissed by
oh
an
yeah, absolutely,
abuse of power,
absolutely.
basically by leading a witness or a testimony by yeah,
Coercion, yeah,
prejudicing it. Mhm.
yes, absolutely.
That makes sense. And then once you once you're secure in that, and again, hopefully you have more than one person to help that review those legal and ethical considerations with you, either whether that's an internal or external legal advice or an external someone who's come in to moderate for you. Now you have to determine the appropriate action, and this is where it gets very interesting, especially when we're not talking about termination, when we're
Right.
talking about disciplinary action and keeping people at their jobs, and then also putting preventative measures in place. How do we decide on disciplinary
Yeah,
actions?
you want to make sure that the corrective action fits the violation. For example, if a person, let's say, is tardy, well,
Mm-hmm.
you wouldn't necessarily terminate the person because it's the first time being tardy or maybe absent from work. Okay. Now you would perhaps terminate if this is the third, fourth, or fifth time the person has been tardy within a short period of time. So you want to make sure that the corrective action fits the violation.
Mhm,
On the
mhm,
other hand, let's say it's the extreme going back to violence or theft or dishonesty. Let's
mhm,
say, for example, the person stated on their timesheet they was at work at 8 o'clock a.m., but they show up on their Facebook post at a park, at an amusement park at 8 o'clock. Well, that's considered ghost employment. Uh, that's a very serious, because that's theft of time. And
mhm,
so a person can be discharged or terminated for theft of time. And
mhm,
so again, you want to make sure that you have clearly stated policies. That's why, if you notice, in most corrective actions, they will say uh, continued violation of this policy may result in further corrective action up to and including termination of your
mhm,
position with XYZ. That's kind of like common
mhm,
HR
mhm,
language that gives them a broad range that says, yes, you could be terminated, or it could result in further corrective action. Now, some companies have what they call progressive disciplinary, where they may go with a verbal warning, a written warning, a final written warning, and then termination.
mhm. So that is a helpful way to proceed. And in some cases, there is company policy and procedures for
Yes.
them. So, obviously looking into that. Uh, and then let's say that a satisfactory disciplinary measure has been made. Then what? How do we prevent this from happening again? How do we use these findings to really implement measures that prevent future
Yeah.
problems?
You want to make sure that when you write your corrective action, that in somewhere within that document should be expectations going forward and the consequences. This is perhaps the biggest frustration with management. They are very good as far as the expectation, but there are no consequences. So the person says, well, you didn't say what would happen if I continued to be late or if I continued this behavior. So you want to make
Mhm,
sure there are consequences. So the person knows, if you continue this behavior, there are going to be consequences for continuing to violate policy, exhibit these negative behaviors, insubordination, threatening behavior, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's what you want to make sure that you do. Now, the truth of the matter is, even with that, people still violate. And that's where you have to make it clear that it will not be tolerated and it will lead to separation of their employment.
and
And
some
the
companies
key
have gone
is,
to great extents now to really come down on this. There's a British company in the news right now that has just started implementing checks on employees to see if they're actually at their desk, because they have a basic requirement that they have to be at their desk, at the business, at the building, X number of hours a week. And they're installing software and other mechanisms to actually prove that you're
yes,
there, because people aren't showing up based on just word of mouth. They can't just take their
yeah,
word for it. So, and then people start feeling like, well, this was unfair policing. Well, but not if that's a company policy that you
now that's a
absolutely
company
have to be
policy.
at your desk for a certain, 20 hours a week, and the rest you can work from home. So, again, it's as always with everything, there's always a few people who cause challenges for everybody
Yeah.
else. It seems
And
to
think
be the
about
way of the
this,
world.
Amazon, I believe, in 2025, they're doing away with remote work for the most part. And everyone has to report back to the office because there have been abuses. Now, a lot of companies are still implementing hybrid schedules, but there are some, you have to understand, with some major companies, they have real estate and they're paying rent on these empty office buildings.
Yeah.
And so they're saying to themselves, well, wait a minute, we have these massive office buildings with no one in there, but a very limited scale. So it makes sense for them to say, hey, we need
Mhm.
people to come back to the office. And to your point, it's easier to manage when people have one location. I can physically see that John and Lyman and Sal, they're at their desk, as opposed to, well, they should be at their monitor at home, but I don't know. They could be, have their laptop and they're at the amusement park somewhere or on
Right.
vacation.
And this goes back to, business and corporate administration and decisions, which is going to vary by company. And there's so much controversy right now. There's such a huge percentage of people who do work remotely who really believe that they're more productive. And in many cases, that's even proven statistically. But there's other kinds of businesses and certain kinds of environments where it's going to be required. So being sure that, also in just one last note here before the note, in your hiring practices as well, make sure that those things are very clearly spelled out so you don't have to deal with it later. So you don't have to leave it ambiguous and then have someone not showing up because they assumed they didn't have to. Or, like making sure that the communication is very clear from day one is the most important.
That is so important. So important.
Well, we're going to run to a quick break. Yeah, we're going to run to a quick break right now, and then we're going to wrap up with a few key points here in how to communicate those outcomes, how to document the process. So for our wrap up and for the wrap up of this entire series, which is conducting workplace investigations, stay tuned. Please like, subscribe, stick around. We'll be right back to bring you the best of the best in just a moment.
Get ready to unlock your full potential and transform your vision into reality. Go beyond traditional employee engagement to focus on the whole person with the focused Meta Mindset system. Experience real, measurable progress towards personal and professional goals. Dr. Lyman Montgomery and Scottlin provide tailored guidance and support to help you overcome obstacles and thrive. Join them for their engaging events, like the Lunch and Learn webinar series, and experience the future of employee engagement. Visit MetaGagement.com now to get started today.
All right, and welcome back to MetaGagement-HR with Dr. Lyman Montgomery and myself, Ann Scottlin, and we are closing the loop today, discussing how to make decisions, communicating outcomes, and this is the end of our 4-part series on conducting workplace investigations. We just talked quite a bit. How do you review the evidence and findings? How do you determine that appropriate action? And then how do you create preventative measures to help this not to happen again? But one of the biggest things that is often kind of hanging over the head of the HR professional is documenting the process and communicating the outcome. Just briefly, let's talk about communicating the outcome. Let's talk about transparency and employee relations.
Yes, that is so important, being transparent. If, for example, you are the investigator, you made a mistake, let them know that in the course of the investigation, we did not interview all of the individuals, let's say in the break room. That's important to know. If you didn't interview everyone, then did you do a representation? Maybe you said, what, there were 10 people in the break room, and so we just randomly chose 3 or 5. You want to put that in there. Because you don't want to have a report come out and say, well, wait a minute, no one talked to me. What do you mean you said you interviewed people in the break? I was in the break room. No one asked me. So you want to be transparent as far as the scope and the limitations of your investigation. And the reason you want to put limitation there, that speaks to the scope. For example, we only interview those that were at work on that day. If you're doing like a climate investigation where they say, what, this particular department has a reputation of discrimination. Maybe you only interview those people that were there on that day. Well, a limitation is we didn't interview everybody. Another limitation could be we didn't have access to everyone because 3 of the 5 people were out on a leave of absence or vacation. And so again, whatever limitations of your investigation, you want to put that in there as far as being transparent. Anything that could have changed the outcome, you want to make that known as well. Now, let me say this real quick. There's a difference between being transparent to a report that goes to leadership and transparency when it comes to the report that might be published publicly or given to those involved. And the difference being, there's certain information that might be sensitive that you don't want the public to know. So sometimes if it's a public document that your policy says all investigations we put online. Well, instead of putting people's name, you might have subject A, subject B
Mm-hmm.
to protect their identity. Okay. You would strike like sensitive information such as, name, addresses, even gender or race, any type of what we call identifiers.
Mm-hmm.
Because let's say you have a company that everybody knows is 95% female. Well, it wouldn't, and you mentioned a male. Well, there's only 2 men working in the department, so by process of elimination, they can kind of figure out. So you want to make sure you remove those identifiers.
Really important to know those things and just be aware of your good practices when it comes to that.
Yes.
Also with documenting your investigation, making sure your final report, making sure those key elements are included in your final investigation report, keeping immaculate records,
Yes.
securely storing those records, those investigative documents for future reference. Super critical that those are protected, preserved, and as we discussed before, have limited access to only people who are supposed to be able to see them. And finally, we're talking about learning and improving. How do we go forward from this? For example, what would we do for a post-investigation review?
Yeah, you want to look at how the investigation was carried out. What did you learn from the investigation? What were some of the missteps? Every investigation will have missteps. From example, it might be, gee, maybe I should have, asked a different set of questions than what I asked. It
Mm-hmm.
could be, what, I needed to expand the number of people that I interviewed. And again, these are all, Monday morning quarterback type of thing. The other thing is having someone else look at your report and say, hey, is there anything you see in the report that you would have done different? Whether it's the questioning, the type of questions, or maybe, for example, for example, when I was doing an investigation, one of my big takeaways was early on learning not to ask why questions, because I realized every time I asked a person why, they got defensive.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of asking why questions, I would ask what or how questions. For example, instead of saying, why do you think John did this? And people got defensive. Well, I don't know why John did it. I don't know. Instead, I would say, what do you think led to John getting agitated? Well, the what seemed less accusatory and less direct. Or
Mm-hmm.
how do you think this played out? Well, they were in the room, they were in the argument. And so again, those are things that I learned post-investigation,
Mm-hmm.
not to ask why questions. The last thing that I would say about learning and improving is the more you do it, the better you get.
And that's always encouraging because especially at the front end, or if you're new,
Yes.
fighting through that, like this is never going to end. But yeah, experience like everything else, getting better over time, learning to do the things as simply as we talked about in earlier episodes of this series, like asking open-ended questions, like
Right.
examples you just gave us. And of course, even in the end, setting up feedback loops ongoing so that people who've been involved in that investigation can continue to communicate with you and help you enhance how you conduct future investigations as well. Well, this has been such a great series. Learning how to conduct investigations, from decision making, documentation, communication. And we want to thank you all for being with us here in the series, and actually here with us on this last episode of season 1. We're so excited to have had you along. And please always send us your questions and comments. Go to our website, leave us a message, or check out what we have to offer for you. Reach out to Dr. Lyman Montgomery or myself at any time. We would love to hear from you. And as always, please like and comment, and keep watching for additional episodes. Same time, same place on whatever platform you're watching or listening today. Lyman, any final words today?
You know, it's always a pleasure doing these podcasts, but also to those out there that are HR professionals and those that have HR responsibilities. We hope that these have been beneficial, relevant, and pertinent to help you do your job much better.
Amazing. And as always, Dr. Lyman Montgomery, until next time, thank you, everybody. See you then.